Welcome, everybody. I want to extend my gratitude for everyone joining our webinar today on how to become an MSL leader. My name is Elio Evangelista. I'm a director with the ACMA. And before we get too far, I want to just give a brief background on the ACMA. What the ACMA does is put together accredited programs for professional development. And our flagship program is the Board Certified Medical Affairs Specialist certification, or otherwise known as the BCMAS, which has been developed to establish standards for MSLs and medical affairs professionals. I want to thank Jim Antonis, who's joining us tonight to deliver this webinar, and he'll be answering a slew of questions that I'll be asking him about the process that people undergo to become an MSL leader. And to start, Jim, I was hoping you could just provide our audience with your background so that they have a better understanding of your experience and, your background within the medical affairs and pharma industry.
Right. So I started as a recruiter back in March 10th of 1986. So I've got about 35 plus years in the industry. It started off in sales, and, placed a lot of pharmaceutical salespeople. And then in 2000, I kind of switched my focus to specializing in only medical affairs.
Great, great. So I've put some information about Jim here on the screen. We'll put this back up at the end. I want to emphasize that if you have questions, please feel free to submit them in the Q&A window on Zoom. We'll be able to address those questions at the end. And if you want to get in touch with Jim, you can see his contact information here. And then again, I'll bring this back up at the end of the session. So Jim, we wanted to start out just by talking about, what people can do to prepare for an MSL leadership role. Can you talk a little bit about what some of the important things are to keep in mind when working with a recruiter like yourself who's focused in medical affairs?
Sure. I think the first thing that's really important is communication. A lot of times, I could reach out to somebody and I don't hear back, and then, everything's about timing in this business, right? So, if you have friends that are MSLs, or you're trying to break in, or you're not an MSL yet, I'd get with some of your friends maybe who have worked with other recruiters or who can refer you recruiters that they've had success with. Of course, make sure you have a resume or a CV that's ready to go. And but I think the most importantly is communication. I always say, if you don't call back, then you don't know what you're missing, right? So communication is the key. Building a relationship with a recruiter. Somebody I've known a lot of folks from the day that I started that I still work with today, or that have moved on to other companies. So the relationship's really important.
Yeah, that definitely sounds like a critical component of the process. Can you tell us, what can MSLs do to prepare themselves when they're getting ready to work with a recruiter?
When they're getting ready to work with a recruiter, well, doing some research, getting their ducks in order as far as preparing, maybe interviewing the recruiter. On a daily basis, I get requests from other recruiters to join my LinkedIn, but finding maybe somebody that has a good reputation, or people that have had a good relationship with in the past, that's important. It's important that they ask the questions to find out, is this somebody that I feel that I can work with? And if so, then I think the biggest thing for the applicants is not to reach out to too many recruiters. The reason for that is believe it or not, as big as the MSL or medical affairs world is now, from where it was, it's still, everybody knows everybody, and it's still a small niche. So the more recruiters working on, say, ABC company, and we're trying to, let's say, get you into that opportunity, it doesn't look good on the candidate that they're being submitted by so many firms. So I always tell people, get 2, maybe max 3 recruiters that you feel comfortable with, and, get that relationship going and go from there.
Yeah, that certainly makes sense. So when you're being asked to fill an MSL leadership position, what are some of the core responsibilities that are typically asked of those candidates?
Well, for starters, they have to be organized, right? I've had a number of people that I've known over the years that have great time management skills, great communication skills. These are all things that, these leaders have. But I think what makes a great leader, somebody that can coach and mentor people, somebody that really has that empathy that goes out of their way of helping others. You've heard that term, dance like nobody's watching, right? It's kind of the same thing. Go out of your way to help other people. These are things that leadership traits have, right? That people get promoted into these roles because of, what they've done as an MSL.
Yes, and we'll definitely talk a little bit more later about the MSL leadership skill set. So when you're talking with candidates, I'm sure you have these conversations about the types of roles they're looking for. Do they often tell you, some of the reasons that they want to move into MSL leadership?
Yeah, I think most of the time, Elio, they think it's the next progression in their career, right? And so, for some people, they may say, well, I'm looking for a leadership opportunity now. Or they feel that at this point in time, they may be ready. I had a candidate just earlier in this week that I've known that, he said, hey, for Jim, he goes, my next step now is, for me, I feel management. And he goes, I just got my MBA. He goes, that's helped me quite a bit. And he goes, this is a track that I want to pursue. So, whether it's taking courses, accreditation courses, getting an MBA, doing things that you can do to better yourself, to head in that direction. I don't think everybody should look into a leadership position necessarily. Just like all salespeople that don't make great sales managers, right? There's a lot of great people who have been in the industry for many years that are now principal MSLs, and they're doing very, very well. But you have to have, I think, a certain skill set, a certain passion for people, mentoring people and coaching people to become that leader.
Right. And are they looking for these roles because they feel it's going to be more rewarding for them? Maybe you can talk a little bit about some of the rewarding aspects of a career as an MSL leader.
Sure. Well, I think, I think for a lot of people, they do feel it's rewarding when you see somebody that you mentor or coach, and then they're doing very, very well. Then they're moving up the ladder and they've done well. There's some gratification there. Even myself as a recruiter, I see somebody, I place somebody, and now they're a director, they're a senior director. It's like, wow, that's phenomenal. So I think that's the biggest gratification, is seeing people do well. And I've been very fortunate to work with a number of great leaders in the medical affairs industry.
Oh, that's great. That's great. You talked a little bit about preparations for, working with a recruiter. What about what MSLs can do to prepare and actively work towards a career as an MSL leader?
To work towards an MSL leader?
Right. In their careers, what do you see them, what steps do you see them taking to work towards becoming an MSL leader? You mentioned an individual who had just gotten his MBA. Do you feel like that
his MBA, right?
Is an important step? Is that not an important step?
Well, I don't think it's for everybody, but for him, this was his mindset, and this was his skill set. He thought by gaining his MBA, it's going to add to his resume, which it definitely will. right? And but I do believe. I'm sorry, Elio. Can you just repeat that last question there?
Yes,
You
I
asked
was,
me.
just wondering, what career steps MSLs can take to prepare themselves to move up that
Oh, I'm
ladder
sorry.
into
Okay.
leadership.
Yes. So I think one of the things is being upfront and honest with your current manager, letting them know that this is something that you want to do, that you don't want to become, or stay as an MSL. You want to move forward. Asking them, what can I do to, get ahead in my career? Are there certain things I could do? And if you have that one-on-one, with your boss, and they have an idea that there's some interest, then maybe there'll be special projects or certain things you can do to help benefit your career in the long run.
Great, excellent, thank you. Let's move on now. We're gonna start talking a little bit more about the MSL leaders' backgrounds now with these questions. I think you already answered at least the first part of my next question, which was going to be, can anyone become an MSL leader? We've already heard you say it's not really for everybody, but are there specific traits that these leaders have that help differentiate themselves?
Yes, there are actually. Some of these folks, well, number one, they have to be very empathetic. They have to have great time management skills. They have to be, have that coaching and mentoring ability, right? The ability to use sound judgment. And I think strong planning and organizing and skills are important for a leader.
And how about experience? How many years do MSLs typically work in the field before they start to, look at leadership and become a leader?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there really is no definite answer to that. And I'll give you a couple of examples. One lady I know who's a senior director was with the company for 6 months, and they promoted her to a director level role. And since, she's been the senior director for many, many years now, right? And then I have another lady that I know that I've placed in the past. She'd been an MSL for 12 years, was just recently an associate director, became a director for 4 months, and is now the national director of the group. So there isn't, it's what I call PTO, right? It's when performance, timing, and opportunity all kind of cross together. And when that happens, then there's an opportunity, and but there's not a given, 3 years and I become a leadership, there's an opportunity for me to become a director. One of the other things I think that's important is when you look at a lot of these companies, there's different titles, right? So one company you can go to work for, it might be a medical science liaison, then a senior level medical science liaison. Novartis, if you look at Novartis, they have different roles there. You can move up to associate director, but even as a director, it's more of a senior level MSL. So titles can be kind of deceiving.
Yeah, we're definitely familiar with the different titles that liaisons have in the field, absolutely. And then, I could see that extending into the, the leadership positions as well. So you did start to talk a little bit about outlining the path towards becoming an MSL leader. It sounds like there's not, a definitive path or, distinct path that everybody follows. There are certainly differences amongst MSLs, whether they are, certified as medical affairs specialists, or some have done fellowships. What are some of those elements that you see on the career path towards becoming an MSL leader?
Well, that's just it. I have a gentleman that was an MSL, and he was so well liked as a medical science liaison that anytime there was a need for an MSL, they would ask him to actually come out and to do a presentation and what have you. So he was going all over the country, and the next thing you know, he's became a leader. So he was doing things outside of his regular job, and that was noted by senior leaders, right? That they saw that, and now this gentleman's a senior director with his current company, and he's done very well for himself.
Gotcha. Okay. So it doesn't sound like there's a specific background or set of experiences that companies or medical affairs organizations are looking for in an MSL leader. Is that correct?
No, that is correct. No, there isn't a given set. Some companies hire people that they've known or worked with in the past, right? And they bring people over to their current company, and a lot of times it's people hire people that they have something in common with. When I became a recruiter, the gentleman that I went to work for in 1986, he was an ex-Marine in the Vietnam War, right? My dad was ex-Marine at POW in the Korean War. So we had that in common, mm-hmm. right? He wanted to play drums. I played drums. We had that in common. So there was, we had some certain things in common, and 35 years later, I'm still a recruiter. So people do hire. Yeah, people hire from the people they have in common with, or certain likes or hobbies or what have you. There's no given path, let's say, right? There's no, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this for 3 years, and I'm going to become a leader in medical affairs.
Yeah, and I think you brought up a good point. I'm sure there are people in the audience who are wondering, is it more likely that they'll hire leaders from within the organization, or do you see percentages of the time where it's they're hiring outside the organization, bringing in someone from outside? What's your take on that?
So I've seen both. I always like to see it if companies can hire from within. It sends a good message to the people working there, right? That, there's an opportunity maybe for me to move up within this organization. I think a lot of times companies will, put the positions out there if they feel maybe the people that they have aren't ready yet, or they're looking for a certain skill set that they don't have.
Yep. Well, speaking of skill sets, that's our next area that we wanted to cover, is sort of the skill set necessary to become an MSL leader. And you touched on this in our first set of questions about preparation, but what are some of the operational skills you feel are necessary to become an MSL leader?
Well, yeah, operational skills. When you mean operational skills, what do you mean by that, Elio? Specifically?
The tactical skills that MSLs need to ensure they have and are demonstrating in their day-to-day role, so that when they're being considered for leadership positions, they've shown that they have or have demonstrated some of that experience, some of those skills.
Yeah, no, I think strong planning and organizational skills. I think one of the biggest things that they have to have is I think I mentioned earlier, was the communication. I know some of the people that I deal with, the leaders, their phones are open from 6 a.m. to 6:30 at night, and their people can pretty much, contact them anytime. It's having that open communication. But I think, I think being well organized, having some of those communication skills and other things that, we may take for granted these leaders have.
Yeah, communication is sometimes a challenge for folks. I don't necessarily think it's a challenge for MSLs, because it's such a big part of the job is communication. But, when I say that, I think, more so about communication with executives and leaders within the organization. What are some of the steps that individuals can take, to demonstrate that type of higher level communication, to set themselves up for leadership?
Well, I think it's most important. So I don't understand your question, Elio. How do they set themselves up?
Yeah, what steps can they take to demonstrate that they can speak, to higher ups, and communicate well with higher ups? Is it presentations that they can give?
I see. Sure. Right. I think it's absolutely. I think it's presentations. I think it's actually asking, your director, your boss that you're currently working for, what can I do to, what can I do to show you that I have more than just being an MSL, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's certain things you can do as an MSL to maybe be given that opportunity to do so. Perfect example is this, right? I have, my daughter's boyfriend, right? He's a contractor. He works for Apple. And, he's like, I'd really like to get on board with Apple full time. How do I, any idea how I do that? I said, absolutely. You get there early, you stay late, you make friends, and you ask, what else can I do? And now he's training people, and it looks like he probably will be a full-time Apple employee. That's what you have to do.
That's a great example,
right?
Great example. Yeah, and communication sometimes is considered a soft skill, and I think there are some soft skills that are necessary that people don't always focus on. What are some of the main soft skills other than communication that MSL leaders should have?
Oh, well, yeah, that would be empathy, emotional intelligence, passion, right? Coaching, mentoring. These are people persons, right? Or these people really love to see people do well, right? And this is from my experience. I'm talking from my experience. The people that I know that are leaders, when I'll go ahead and I'll talk to somebody about an opportunity, I don't necessarily talk, of course I tell them about the drug or, what the company is and what have you, but for me, it's about the leadership, because when you're going to work somewhere, it's the leadership that's either going to make it or break it for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think sometimes people, they might want to move up the career ladder. They think about, management being the next step, but maybe they don't, they think about managing people as sort of a hurdle for them. They maybe haven't managed people before, and they're worried about that. How big are the teams typically that, when you start to enter MSL leadership, how big are those teams that they have to manage?
Sure. So once again, it all depends. I mean, I've seen teams as far as, as small as 4 to as big as 40.
Mm-hmm.
When one dermatology company was getting set up here, and I was fortunate, I placed the VP of medical affairs, and their first MSL, their plan was to bring on 4 people, and that way they pretty much have coverage of the country, and, the VP was in place, and that didn't happen. They ended up getting rid of everybody and ended up hiring a bunch of salespeople for now. But then you have companies like Sanofi, and they may have up to like 40 MSLs, throughout the country. So, again, it really depends. I would say an average is 12 to 16.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And this is for some of the smaller companies, the biotechs and what have you, but I would say that's a good average.
Yeah, I think that definitely makes sense for the team sizes, and it might differ for therapeutic areas as well. That can often be a determining factor too.
Sure.
Okay. I think this next section would be an area that I think a lot of our attendees would be pretty curious about, and that's the job market for MSL leaders. We often hear that to get jobs as MSLs in the field can be pretty difficult because there are just a lot of applicants for every open position. What can you tell us about the job market and what it's like today for those MSL leadership positions?
Right. Well, today it's the job market in medical affairs is booming. I am super busy myself, and I'm currently working several leadership roles that I have, and people can see opportunities whether they go on Indeed or LinkedIn, or they look at some of these different boards. But right now, I would say medical affairs is really booming. Interesting enough, I had a gentleman about 15 years ago tell me, he goes, mark my words. He goes, look what's going to happen in the next 10 to 15 years within medical affairs. He goes, what you're going to see is a difference. You're going to see the sales numbers drop as far as the number of salespeople, and you're going to see the medical affairs teams really, really grow. And, he hit that right on the head, because that's really what's happening.
Yeah, and of course, a quarter century or more ago, you would have seen MSL teams sometimes being staffed by people who used to be sales folks. Do you see that that's still the case anymore, or is that just a bygone era?
No, I think that's a bygone era. As a matter of fact, back in 2012, I had the opportunity to work with a couple of people that I knew. They went over to Boehringer Ingelheim, and they were creating this new group. And this new group, they wanted people that came from medical affairs, that have medical affairs, MSL experience. But this group was actually calling on the regional thought leaders, talking about their already marketed product. And so my question is, if you're an MD and somebody's asking you a question, can you still talk as you're in medical affairs? And they said no, because it's on the commercial side. Well, that group lasted for about 3 years, and then BI disbanded the group.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
So, and I know Merck had something very similar to that as well, right? Where they hired salespeople, and, a lot of times they would kind of cross over as almost as a liaison.
Yeah. And I wonder, what sort of recommendations can you provide to individuals in terms of their resumes and CVs when applying for leadership roles?
Well, I think their resume, it would have to, if you've been a manager, a pharmacy manager, or if any of that should be in your summary. If anything, if you read the job description, maybe tailor it to the job description, be specific. That doesn't necessarily mean have 50 different resumes or CVs, right? Mm-hmm. But if, especially if it's a therapeutic area that you're very familiar with, right? Maybe something you've specialized in. And, you'll see that sometimes when people hire, maybe they don't have necessarily that exact experience, but they've been, somebody who's been in that therapeutic area for a very long time, and then they get hired for, a role. Maybe they'll bring them in as a medical director, and they don't have previous experience.
Yeah. And is that something that, working with a recruiter, they can help you with, both the resume and even interview prep?
Absolutely.
So what are some of the things you typically talk to candidates about in terms of preparing for interviews, as, in these roles and in general?
Yeah, well, when I chat with my candidates regarding roles, I'll have them look the company up. I will provide them with information. The one thing, because I've been doing this for so long, I think the one thing that I'm able to share with them is the personality of the people that are actually doing the hiring. I could tell them a little bit about the person they're interviewing with, maybe the VP they're interviewing with, their backgrounds, and of course I always have them do their research, make sure they look these folks up, and really spend some time to know what the company is all about. I had, an individual not too long ago that was in a final interview, and this was something her presentation was something that she said she did all the time, and she knew it. But when, a question was asked, she said, well, I have to get back to you on that. So needless to say, they didn't move forward with that candidate. But preparation, I can't stress this enough. Being prepared, really learning about the company, finding out, is there a new indication? Oh, yeah, look at 2 weeks ago, they just got a new indication. Being up on this, and really, you're investing time. You're investing time, and it's important that you do that because it is a small world, and you may end up somewhere else and that person's there. So
sure, yeah, absolutely.
Preparation is everything.
Yeah, and I think being well prepared, even if you don't get the job, at least you feel like you did everything you could at that point.
Absolutely.
We've seen medical affairs certifications become more popular over the last few years. Do you feel that medical affairs certifications make people better positioned for MSL leadership roles?
I think not necessarily just for leadership roles. I think it's showing that you're investing in your future. And I had talked to Jill White a number of months back, right? And she was really, she kind of opened my eyes a little bit more to the certification, as far as what you folks do there. And so, I think if you can have that on your resume, it's definitely not going to hurt by any means.
Great. Well, we've got a couple of wrap-up questions that, I think are good to kind of take a few steps back and look at it more holistically. What are some of the trends happening right now in medical affairs and MSL management that you think would be important for candidates to know?
Well, I think everything's kind of, we're in the digital age, right? And I think from, what we've learned over this last year and a half with the pandemic is how companies are running and doing business. So although travel is starting to happen again, and, companies are, starting to see their KOLs and people are starting to go back out into the field, I don't think it's something that's going to, I think this has changed. I think a lot's still going to be virtual. I don't think there's going to be as many KOL visits in the past. Will could tell you he came from Gilead, right? I think they had, it was 60 face-to-faces a month was what was required by the MSLs. And I just don't see that happening anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, we definitely are seeing an uptick in interest around digital KOLs and what can be done virtually with virtual meetings. So I don't think those are going to go away, but I do know that MSLs are happy to be going back to face-to-face meetings right now.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, it's been too long.
Okay. So one last question before we, open it up for questions from the audience. What are some key takeaways you'd like our audience to leave this webinar with?
Yeah, I think, when you're interviewing, really just be prepared, be passionate, sometimes you go out, you meet somebody and you're like, wow, that was a really nice person. Or, that's the kind of person I want to go fishing with. They're memorable, right? Mm-hmm. And you want to be that memorable person. And, but interviewing shouldn't be stressful. It should be fun, right? Make it fun, because even though you're being interviewed, you need to interview these people as well. Is this somebody I can go to work for? Can I look up to them as a mentor? What am I going to learn from it? Or is this just, am I just making a lateral move, right? Is the grass greener on the other side? So I think, again, if because I know we have so much time, but I think if folks want to spend more time, or if they have questions, they're more than welcome to call me directly. They're more than welcome to send me an email. I get back to everybody that sends me a message, and I'd be more than happy to chat with people one-on-one if they have questions.
Great. So yes, I've put that information back on the screen while we address some of our questions from the audience. We have one here that asks, so this individual is a pharmaceutical, a physician working in sales and marketing in the pharma industry, actually from a leading company in Saudi Arabia, has been in this role since 2004. This person has an MBA in healthcare quality, and wants to be recruited into a medical department. And this person feels they have the skill set of a leader, but after applying hasn't been able to make the shift into medical affairs. Do you feel that this candidate coming from more of a commercial side has a chance to break into the medical role? Are there steps that you can recommend for this person?
Yes. Well, again, I'm not sure. Is this person a PharmD? They have their BS. What's their, what are their?
It says they're a physician, so MD.
Okay. So they're an MD. Okay. Yes, absolutely. They can break in. Obviously they have, they've got the education piece, right? They understand the commercial piece, right? Mm-hmm. So it's almost like being a buyer at a big department store, right? You know how all the departments work. And, from a science standpoint, he understands or she understands that. From a commercial side, they understand that. So I think just being given an opportunity, and if it's not with the company they're working for currently, then I would look at other companies and start interviewing with other companies. Or if he does have or she has a great rapport, with the people they work for, let them know their interest. And this is, given my background as a physician, I medical affairs is something I really want to pursue.
Great.
A lot of times you have a great salesperson, nobody wants to push them in another role because they've done so well, right? And they don't want to lose that person. So.
Absolutely. I think that definitely does occur. We have another question here. What's the average salary that you see for MSL managers?
For MSL managers. So for an MSL manager, I would say an average is probably $225 to $250 for a manager. And that's like a director level, right? Mm-hmm. So for instance, I'm working on an opportunity right now. It's a regional director. It's for the East Coast. You're probably looking at about $230, $235 on a salary. Yeah.
And how about the tenure that you see for these leaders? Do they stay in these roles a long time? What happens after they first break into a leadership role?
Yeah, well, I've known a couple of people that just love to build teams, and they're there for a couple of years and they move on. But again, it really depends. I mean, I know people that have been at Amgen for 7 years. There's no given number. If people are happy, then they're going to tend to stick around. And if a good leader respects the team that they have, and in turn, then they get the respect back from their people. And, I've worked with some companies that necessarily, they're not blockbuster drugs, but their management's phenomenal and they have great teams. And I've worked with some, companies that have great products where, their managers necessarily aren't thought of as highly, right? So it just depends.
Gotcha. Okay, I have a question about breaking into the role. This individual is a medical student who will be done in the fall and is looking to pursue a career in non-clinical medicine rather than in residency clinical medicine. So, and this person is very interested in breaking into or becoming a subject matter expert in oncology. Are there steps you can recommend this individual to take?
Okay, it doesn't want to go clinical, boy, because oncology, when you're talking therapeutic areas, it's not easy.
Right.
So, if they get depending on what their background is now, you said they're a student right now and they graduate in the fall.
Yes, in the fall.
Then I would look at maybe opportunities. Any way they can break into an oncology company, right? Whether it's med info, whether it's maybe sales, depending on what their background, what they've done previous to going to school, or if they've been doing something even while going through school, right? I would try to utilize that experience and go from there.
Gotcha. And another question, is it enough to just take the USMLE step 1, 2, and 3?
I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah, I've had a number of candidates that have and that are successful as MSLs.
Perfect. Okay. And then someone here has a PhD in organic chemistry with postdocs in medical chemistry projects. Is that something you see being able to crack into the role, even if they have gaps in their resume?
As long as you can, as long as there's a story behind the gaps,
Mm-hmm.
right? As long as, well, from here to here, we moved, or, the pandemic hit, or this is what happened, or,
Yeah.
As long as you have a story and it fits, then that's fine.
Perfect. Yeah, we do have a lot of questions here from people who are wondering if where they can reach out to you to call you. Would you rather they send an email first, or would you like to
go ahead. They're welcome to do either or. If I'm on the line and I can't grab your call, leave me a voicemail. I'll write your number down. Best way is definitely go ahead and shoot me an email and let me know what you're looking to do, and I'll help you any way I can.
Yeah, I didn't know if you wanted to share a phone number here where they could call you.
Sure, absolutely. My office number is 650-373-2006.
Perfect. Okay. And I'm just looking to see if there are other questions. How about for individuals moving to the country or new to the country? What advice would you have for them?
Yeah, that's difficult. I had somebody yesterday reach out to me that just wants to come to the U.S. from India, and it's if you're not already working here, it's extremely tough because as companies ask me to look for candidates, there's such a pool of candidates here, right? So if you come here and you're working, it's one thing. Then I have other companies that, they don't want to deal with the visas. In all my time of doing this, Elio, I was able to get one person sponsored, and this person came from Canada. And so, realistically speaking, from my experience, it's very hard.
Gotcha. And I just, sorry, one more time, could you repeat that phone number so I can type it in the chat here?
Sure. It's 650.
Got it.
373-2006.
Perfect. Okay. All right. So I don't see any other questions unless folks are typing very quickly now. Oh, here's one. Okay, as an incoming pharmacy graduate, should this person pursue a fellowship first or just try to go straight into breaking into an MSL role? Maybe we can talk a little bit more in detail about fellowships.
Sure. Yeah. And they can break in, they can go into a fellowship, if they like. Like I've seen, for instance, a lot of times you get candidates and they'll for instance, you have a PharmD, maybe they go work at CVS for a while, or maybe you have somebody working in the hospital, right? Both those experiences are fine. It's finding the companies that will look at the entry-level candidates. And I think that's the biggest thing, is everybody has to kind of remember who gave them their shot, right? Everybody got a shot, right? So how did I get in? How did I get my shot? Do I pay that back? Real quickly, I had an opportunity probably 2 years ago. A company looked for a very specific individual. I had a lady that had the background. She was based in Boston. She was the only one that had this type of certification, right? The manager happened to be somebody that I placed, and I told him about the background. I said, all I'm asking is 15 minutes of your time to chat with this lady. He did. And he thought outside the box and thought so strongly of this person to go to his boss, and they hired her. And typically they would look for 7 to 9 years of people with experience that, hit all their, hospital experience, cardiovascular experience. But this person was a pharmacist in that therapeutic area. This company was able to think outside the box and gave this person an opportunity, and everybody won.
Yeah, we definitely have, we definitely have individuals who have come through the pharmacy route, the PharmD route, and they're taking our accredited programs, and we see them breaking into roles all the time. So that's definitely an avenue. I think sometimes in pharmacy schools we hear that, that it seems like the fellowship is the be all end all. That's the only way to get into a role in medical affairs, but it's not talked about enough that it's not a one and done thing. You can, even if you don't get a fellowship, there are still going to be opportunities to get roles in medical affairs. Absolutely.
And there are, and again, it just comes down to, which companies, I'm working with a company right now where I've known the manager for years, but they're specific, they want something specific, but it's giving people that have worked in the pharmacy an opportunity to break in as an MSL. So, and I just, there's so many great people out there with so many great skills that just need one opportunity, whether you're working contract to start, right? Because once you're in, you're in. And, I just tell people, hang in there, do what you can. I would tell people, you put all my information on the screen, and I'm grateful for that. Please join my group on LinkedIn. If you're not already a member, join my group, MSL Medical Affairs Professionals. I post the positions that I'm looking for there, as well as, there's some other things going on, and other people will post articles that might be helpful. So please, if you're not already a member, feel free to join.
Right, and that group name is there on the screen. It's MSL/Medical Affairs Professionals. You can find that on LinkedIn.
Exactly.
And we do have time for just a couple more questions. Let me address this first one. The question is about the International Federation of Associations of Pharmaceutical Physicians, or IFAP. And they have a course in medical affairs. We have a accredited course. So but I can address this question. Essentially, there's a big difference between IFAP's course and say our course, the BCMAS. The biggest difference is that BCMAS is accredited and IFAP is not accredited. And so it's not as recognized in the industry by any means the way that BCMAS is. We're also the BCMAS is also the only one that has been trusted by regulators. We've worked with individuals at the FDA, and we keep ours up to date. The BCMAS is updated quarterly. That's not the case with IFAPs by any means. We're not even sure how often they do update it. So, I think if you're looking at a certification program, I really encourage you to look at the BCMAS program, as it's the first one that the first accreditation to come out, and it's also the only the first only accredited program for MSLs and medical affairs professionals. Jim, we have another question here. Just looks like maybe the one last question. A lot of director or leadership postings require an MD. So what's the outlook for PharmDs to move into medical director role? I think we touched on this a little bit, but when they require the MD, do you encourage PharmDs to continue to apply for those roles?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, I know a number of PharmDs that are senior director level folks, actually. And I do realize when you read some job descriptions, it says MD only. But that being said, well, back in 2000, when I was working with Shearing Plow, they wanted 10 to 12 years of experience, and they were getting 3 years of MSL experience, right? So, if the person has the background and they have the therapeutic area, or they have the skill set, I would definitely apply. If you're looking for, say, a medical director, specifically an MD for a role, then that might be a little bit different. But if you're a director, if you're, a senior director, by all means, I would go ahead and continue to apply.
This is going to be the last question, then we're going to wrap it up. This individual has a bachelor's degree in pharmacy and a PhD in neuroscience, 1.5 years postdoc in neurology, and currently working in a biotech industry as a scientist. They've been trying to switch careers to either an MSL or something in medical affairs, but it's been tough getting an interview. And I think that's been a struggle for a lot of folks. They're applying, and they're having a hard time landing the interview. What advice do you give to people in that situation?
Yeah, I know people that have been looking for over a year trying to break in. It's very difficult. This is, this is probably one of the most sought after roles in all of pharmacy, right? It's extremely competitive. When I got into this years ago, in 2000, placing medical affairs folks, there was a handful of people. And now there's so many people recruiting people, there used to be just, a handful of us, right? And now there's a lot of folks. And with that, there's a lot of competition. So don't be discouraged. Do your homework, be persistent. One thing I'm going to leave everybody with, it's for interviewing, it's a book. It's going to cost you $11, maybe $14 max. It's called Knock 'em Dead. And it's probably the best book on interviewing tips that somebody can buy. When I started in 1986, it was a book my boss suggested that we gave sales candidates so they can, go out and learn how to interview. And there might be those questions that aren't asked. The good news is it gets updated. So it's not the same questions as 1986. So that being said, invest $11, $14, whatever it is. You can download the book. The author, his name is Martin Yates. It's going to be the best $11 to $14 you spend.
Is that Yates? Y-A-T-E-S?
Yes, Y-A-T-E-S, correct.
Gotcha. And it's Knock 'em Dead.
Knock 'em Dead. Yeah.
So some folks are asking. I'm going to put that in the chat so that they can take a look.
And just for what it's worth, Elio, when I do talk to these people one-on-one, it's something that I suggest that they do. And, for a lot of people, they may say, hey, you know what? I never thought of this, or that was really good, and I have it in my, I talked to one gentleman the other day, senior director, his daughter now is just, she's a PharmD, right? And I was suggesting, she was, oh, my dad has that on his bookshelf. That's great. So it's something I highly recommend.
Great. And I think everyone here is appreciative of all the advice you've given tonight. I really am appreciative of you giving us so much detail and answering these questions. I think it's been very useful for the attendees. And I think, as we finalize the recording and put it up and send that out, it'll be useful for many, many years to come for folks who can tune in and listen to this. So thank you again, Jim. You've been very informative. Cool. Really appreciate it. And for everyone involved, please, as Jim has said, feel free to reach out to him. And you can also find out more about the ACMA and our programs at medicalaffairsspecialist.org. So please visit, please feel free to reach out. And I hope everybody has a good rest of their day.
Well, Elio, thank you. Thank you, Will, and Sarah, for all you've done and putting this together. I appreciate it.
Great. I appreciate it too. Thank you again. Have a good night, everyone.
All right. Good night. Bye-bye.